I'm Addison Brazil. Grief Club, the podcast, starts now. Welcome back to another episode of Grief Club, the podcast, where we take parts of my book, First Year of Grief Club, A Gift from a Friend Who Gets It, and use them as launching points for deeper conversations with friends and experts. This week's conversation is actually based on the point in the book where I offer our readers the chance to sort of make room and see what shows up. So today's guest is somebody that has come across my radar multiple times through our different families, through our mutual book coach, and sort of those worlds. And so today we are finally making room and seeing what shows up with Mark Silverman. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thanks, Addison. I'm so excited. I love everything you bring to the world. So to be part of it is really fun.
Thank you so much. So the first thing we do to drop in here is a conscious emotional check-in. I'm going to ask you in one word right now, how are you feeling physically?
Ooh, nervous. That show that, because I know this is going to be a real conversation. So like I'm a little keyed up.
Yeah, I'm going to actually say I'm feeling nervous too today, which is odd. In one word, how are you feeling mentally?
Clear.
Say ready. And in one word, how are you feeling emotionally?
Joyful.
You say sloppy with no explanation, because that's the point. Feeling very sloppy today, emotionally. Well, I'm so glad to have you here. And like I said, this is sort of my chance too for us to get to know each other a little better. Your name has come up so much through mutual friends and professional colleagues. And obviously you are an executive coach that is so revered, an author, you have your own podcast. I could talk about you nonstop. But first, I'm going to put you on the spot. This actually was born of Patty, but I'm going to have you build an acrostic poem for us on the spot using the letters of your name and one word or sentence that goes with each one. So M is for, and you go from there.
Let's see. M is for, I was going to say mom, because I'm trying to figure out. First thing I think of for myself is as I'm a dad, right? So man, I'll just say man.
Mhm. And A.
Oh, you want me to just run through these things?
Yeah, your name, yeah.
So A, um, wow, this is such an interesting thing to do. So I'm a man of action. R, um, real,
Hmm.
and K, kick ass.
See, it's
And
funny.
never ever would I talk about myself like that, but that's what comes up when I say those letters. So I'm owning it.
That's why I'm going to keep doing it. It's funny because there's a silent petition from guests to not do that ever again. But then the listeners, weirdly, I got a text today saying that like that's become their favorite thing is because it's on the spot and it's real and the people kind of they click in. So
I just turned 60, and one of the things I love is that I feel so freaking real and kick ass and just vibrant. And I never thought that would be the case at this age.
that's awesome. And I have to say, I was just down in Baja with a bunch of my favorite modern elders, and I hear that a lot. I think there's really something to that U curve of happiness coming back up on the other side because it seems to be freedom 55 and 60 seem to be where it's at. So I got some stuff to look forward to here. I hope. So the first thing I always do is just allow our guests to sort of openly honor their journey. Just take a few minutes to tell us about yourself, about your journey. You can share any grief that you've been through that you want to, but you don't have to in any way. It's just in your own words what honoring your journey and getting to the point where we use words like, executive coach and how you show up in the world today.
Wow. So my story is, a pretty sickly asthmatic kid, short, small, and just kind of nerdy. And one thing we can juxtapose that with the fact that I've never lost a fight, even though I've been in a number of fights. But I was, small and scrappy, and I cheated. Um, and by the time I got old enough for that to change, drugs and alcohol came into the picture, getting molested, and having a lot of that emotional baggage and trauma thrown in there. So we get into my teenage years, and then years of alcohol and drugs and cocaine and lots of fun and games, to where I ended up homeless and living in my truck and 135 pounds, which, I tell that story from stage. I make the joke that I'm a short Jewish Tony Robbins because a few years later I was a millionaire. But there's a lot of real that went with that. You know what I'm saying? It's good. It's a good punchline. But the truth is, for the first quarter of my life, I wasn't a going human concern. I didn't have skills. I remember this woman who was running a workshop. She described me on a scale of 1 to 10. She said, Mark, on a scale of 1 to 10, as a functioning human being, you're a -2. And that kind of sobered me up. And then at 27, I rolled into Washington D.C. and my brother, who passed away this past year, got me sober and sent me to college. So I took one class at a time, two classes at a time, while I bartended and waited tables. Wound up getting married, having kids, and staying sober, getting a college education. Whoop, hold on, I'm still here. Sorry. I hope the magic of editing shows up.
For you whenever you need it.
So I got married, had kids. So that was kind of one of the places where the new Mark showed up. Sober, college educated, wildly successful. Inside still kind of a crumbly homeless guy, but on the outside, the community chair for the Boy Scouts and all that stuff, the basketball coach and driving a sports car. And then about 2010, 2009, that all started to fall apart because the homeless guy started to seep out of the outside. And so the marriage broke up. I got depressed and suicidal and sick and all this stuff. And then this renaissance, that was about at 47, 48. And then the renaissance started at about 50, about 49, 50, to where I created the guy I am today. So we get to executive coach from crumbling, falling apart, completely stone cold sober, and then deciding how to build myself back in midlife.
Wow. Wow. So you are the poster boy of the U curve of happiness, actually, right? At 47, where that U curve predicts you'll be at the bottom is
I hated myself. I was, again, I was suicidal. I didn't want to live. Then I made bargains with the world that I would live until my son Jake graduated high school, my youngest son, right? So I made all these bargains that I would just keep going until when I finally had my spiritual awakenings and things happened where joy entered my life. So that's kind of the 5-minute version of who Mark Silverman is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all that. And I will just say too that I've been looking at that closely. I was down at Modern Elder Academy and they talk about that U curve of happiness and 47 and from my work in men's mental health and with the startup, I know that the statistic around white male men right around 50 for suicide is the highest. So it really correlates with getting out of the bottom of that U. And I'll put it in the show notes so people can see what I'm talking about. I, of course, look at the U and am terrified because I'm 34 and think I've already done my U and I'm going down. But I think it's a little different when you've been woken up a little bit earlier.
Since I did 350 episodes of a podcast called Mastering Midlife: How to Thrive When the Life Asks Most of You, I can tell you that my definition of midlife is when life, when what was working no longer works and life asks for a change or a shift. So that can happen at 34 years old. That can happen at 30 years old. I know people who it happened at 25 years old, where that thing that propelled them no longer works, and they have to figure out how do they create themselves after the conditioning, right? So you're doing your work now, so that when you're 45, you've already done the work. You've already become supple. You've already given in. So if something does show up to change your life at that point, you'll be much more flexible to deal with it than someone who, say, has been in a job or in a marriage or in some sort of conditioned state until that time, and then it falls apart. Now what do I do, right? So you're going to be in a very different place.
That truly resonates. And I've said it from stage and within the book, I think too, but never on here, that, when I woke up the morning after the accident, which was sort of the third monumental grief moment that I had, one thing I always say is suddenly it was like running Windows on Mac. There was no way. It was just
Mm.
not work. The operating system no longer supported like the actual reality that I was expected to live in. And I just right there, I knew this either, ends in suicide or, I do everything in my power to try to shift with this. And so I really resonate. And I guess mine happened 20 years earlier, that moment. But I feel like grief for a lot of people is that activating point. And yeah, it's funny. I feel very much midlife in that soul way, but the mid makes it feel like half. But I'm not obviously not planning to not be around at 60, whatever. But it's just something that
I didn't think I'd be around at 60, and I'm busier, more vibrant, thriving, and more driven than I've ever been in my entire life. So never would have thought that.
I love to hear it. I truly love to hear it. So this is a question I ask everybody before we dig any deeper. If a kid walked up to you on the street and they literally didn't know what the word grief meant, they asked you, "What does grief mean?" How would you respond?
Uh, Whatever happens in your body in response to loss.
I love that.
Because for I have a client who's going through grief right now, and it shows up as anxiety.
Hmm.
Like, he would never categorize it as grief. So it shows up so different for everybody.
You've reached Grief Club. Leave a message after the beep.
Hey, Grief Club, it's me again. Yeah, I know you probably thought you were going to get a break from listening to me talk, but I just wanted to check in and find out how I'm doing. I mean, really, you can be really honest with me. I'm like a different Addison from the Addison that's recording in this episode because this is recorded at a different time. So you can tell me the truth. The best way to do that is to leave a review and like the podcast, but only if you like it. I really think it will help other people who need it find it. So I greatly appreciate you doing that. I'm so curious too, because you honored your journey so fully. One thing that's really sticking with me right now is when you said the homeless man showed up within the successful guy. Now, obviously, you feel on the other side of that now, as you said.
Well, he's still there, and one of the
But
one of
yeah,
the ways I keep him um, wherever he is by acknowledging that he's always there.
hmm, I love that. Yeah, I was going to ask if there's any accompanying grief, even though it is for the better sometimes, in sort of letting go of that version, like you said.
So this is okay. This is where it starts to get real because I feel a lot of emotion coming up.
Hmm.
So my brother is the one who got me sober, and my brother died uh, this past fall. Drugs and alcohol. He and I spoke every single day and for years, and I did that specifically to keep him going, keep him a lot, keep him moving forward. And he died, and it was a horrible death. It was as dramatic as it could possibly be, and I've spent a lot of time, um, even though I'm very successful. And if you look at me on social media, like, I look like the guy who has everything together and all that. But inside, that homeless guy, that addict, the guy who screwed everything up in his life several times, I carried that echo.
Hmm.
When my brother died, I went and did a medicine journey. Oh, I had it already scheduled, and I did it about 2 weeks later. And what surprised me is I came out of the other side of the medicine journey. And when they did the circle for sharing, what came out of my mouth surprised me as much as anything else. It was that, holy shit, am I fucking amazing? I had the same demons as my brother. I had that pull to the darkness, every day of my life. And I still got sober, stayed sober, got a career, made money, supported a family, raised two amazing sons, lovely relationship with my ex-wife, beautiful relationship with my husband. I have the life and the career that I want. How badass am I that I actually did the work? I'm the guy who's done decades and decades of work on himself. And that shocked me. My brother's death, the gift he gave me in that was that we had the same demons and we could have gone the same path. and that all that work that I put in. And again, I will never take credit for my sobriety. I believe it's some semblance of grace, and action. But to, beating myself up for 30 some odd years, and actually saying, I actually took the steps. I actually did what I needed to do to get to this place today. So that's the gift of that.
Mm, wow. Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. I selfishly want to ask, when you share that, because it is so recent and so meaningful to you, when you say to somebody, my brother died last fall, like you just did, I want to ask, what, if you just really connect with like your heart right now, like what do you really want to hear back? Because we all freeze when someone shares death like that, including myself. After writing a grief book, I still freeze when I hear something, heartbreaking like that. But what do you really want to hear?
I don't want to hear. I don't need to hear anything, because again, I don't have that like pang and grief as if, because of the circumstances of his death and all that. But I like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Mm.
Were you close or something like that is a lovely thing for me to hear, and it's something that I would say to someone else. I would stop and just say, wow, I'm really sorry, how is that for you? But for me, I don't really care.
I love that. I mean, I love both words. I think that's the one question that I get asked over and over again is, what do I say? And I'm always like, I don't know what to say. And I'm supposed to be the grief guy. Like, I don't know. I still sort of freeze for a moment. And so I loved when you said, I don't need anything, because I feel that way as well a lot of the time. I don't need anything. It can just be mentioned and honored the same way. I also went to work, or I also, like it can exist within our daily lives that this beautiful sort of heartbreaking thing has happened. And then
And so it's interesting. My neighbor's son died a year and a half ago, 20 something year old son, and then his wife just passed 2 months ago.
mm,
She couldn't deal with the grief, and he made it real clear that he kind of wanted to be left to himself for a while, which understandable. And I have taken to, when my brother died, people gave me plants and gave me cookies and sugar, and I'm like, do you know me? I don't want the sugar. And they gave me all this stuff, and nothing was fine. My rabbi's wife baked a sourdough bread for me and some soup, a homemade sourdough bread. That bread was the thing. That eating that bread with some butter and soup was the thing I needed. Like that, when as soon as he died. So I learned to make the sourdough bread, got the starter from her. So her starter was named Faith. I named mine Faith and Love because it came from hers. And now I bake bread for anybody who needs a lift, like, so that give them faith and love. So I brought him over. I cut up a whole thing of bread, put it in Ziploc bags, told him to throw it in the freezer. So here's some bread for him. So, and then I saw him someplace, and then I just got a thing that came across my uh, computer while we're talking. What time should I come over for dinner? Because I invited him over for dinner.
mm,
And going past, and someone said to me, he said he didn't want to be bothered. That's intrusive. I'm like, well, I'm a New York Jew, and he can always say no. And he's like, what time do you want me there? So, and like, what are we going to talk about? I don't know. Right. But I'm going to open myself up because I don't want a man to be alone in a big house with, filled with all that grief.
yeah, really making that room and just seeing what shows up. And I do feel like that is different than being talked at. And what I was getting at is, even to this day, sort of, in order to explain something, like I can't really mention my book without having to explain why I wrote a book about grief at 33. I mean, that's just like sort of the trap. And like dating, meeting people, meeting new friends, like being even at like a bar or wherever, and it's like, well, what's your book about? And you're just like, oh, I don't want to do it. Like you're just like, it's about happiness. It's about everything going great for.
Time management.
Yeah, exactly. But it is interesting. I noticed this to this day, this sort of, and I don't know if it's the Canadian in me. Maybe I need a little more New York Jew in me, but the this sort of pattern of, me mentioning it, someone saying, I'm sorry for your loss, and then me awkwardly saying thank you.
Mm.
In about 30 seconds, I've gone from sharing the most heartbreaking, hurtful experience of my life to saying the words thank you. And it just disconnects for me. And I know the thank you is for them acknowledging, but it's
Mhm.
just this weird thing where I'm always like, there is something so weird about that 30 seconds that it starts that way and it ends that way. And it happens sort of every time where it's like, I'm sorry, that's unimaginable. And then I'm saying thank you. And then sort of it feels like helping them with like with my loss, like that's what that thing
Sure.
sort of kind of feels like a lot of the time. So it's been a constant theme coming up. So I was happy to kind of tap into that with you a little bit more and just because it's so fresh too of of letting people know that like sometimes that you don't need anything. And like what you're doing with your neighbor there, making that space, and nourishment can come in so many different forms, having that bread for when you need it later is a very big thing. I can speak from experience. I mean, in the first 2 weeks, it's just like flowers and lasagnas and cookies and whatever. But then there's this silence that follows a little later on. And when those people show up looking to nourish you, I know that can be very, very meaningful.
Yeah. When my brother died, uh, I called my ex-wife and told her to ask my sons and prompt my sons to call me and check on me. And I told her, I said, I don't need them to. I'm okay dealing with all this stuff, dealing with all the wreckage, all that stuff. I said, I'm fine, but I need them as men to be there for their dad. So
Mm,
have them call me at least every other day to check in. So they knew what to do when someone is going through something like
mm,
this.
that makes perfect sense. So I want to pivot and sort of, you've obviously navigated the loss of a lot that's meaningful throughout your life and something you created. And then you've also have this amazing thought leadership as an executive coach, specifically around mastering to-do lists. And so what kind of sparked for me with your book and also your story was this idea of if there's people listening, I know that it can go two ways. Grief can kind of be a paralytic sometimes, but it can also be this opportunity to overschedule. And I definitely over to dude so that I was never feeling, the whole human doing, not a human being. That was sort of my goal. And I'm really noticing that as I'm coming out of you know, this work that I've been doing on healing is it's almost like I've been a vampire in this dark room for years. And it's like someone turn on the lights and like literally I feel everything. And I'm
Mm.
like, I can feel every part of me going, do, like find things to do, find things to do, like shut this down, don't be, do. And it's like, no, this was the whole point of fighting for 10 years to show back up and be here fully. And it just feels like this is like not safe. This is so visceral. Like, it
Mm.
just like in a movie when they're slowly becoming a vampire and they can like hear their like blood pumping and like it almost feels like or like a werewolf transforming where I'm just so sensitive and aware and available to my experience, which sounds beautiful, but for someone who's been in the face of grief for all of their 20s into their early 30s, it is like whoa, it's bright and loud and scary, and there's obviously things that we all need to navigate our normal jobs and work within grief, but there can be that tendency to just like overdo it. And so I just
Mm.
want to ask you a little bit more about that.
It's interesting. I was just talking to someone called me to inquire about coaching with me, and I can't because I'm blessed with a full practice and can't take on any clients. It's a beautiful thing, but lovely man, and I wanted to spend some time with him. And he's a clergyman, so he has a parish, a community of people. And I said, so what is it that you want from coaching? Because he heard me on some spiritual um, podcast. I said, what is it that you're looking for coaching? And he says, I want to influence my people. I want them to have that inner fire
Mhm.
that, to get them to understand who they are inside. I said, okay, and what else? And he said, I want to deepen my relationships with people. I want to feel my relationships. Okay. And then he said, and I want to be more present with my children. And I said, great. So we talked for a little bit longer. And then I said, it's really interesting that all the things that you wanted are available to you right now. And he says, what do you mean? I said, well, you're the head of a community and all that stuff. You have 9 children. You're 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 a busy man. Like and you told me you were an introvert. He says he's a rabid introvert. So 9 children, head of a community. He's not going to ever be alone. I said, it's interesting. I'm an introvert. And I'm known as a very loving guy, but I wake up Eeyore every freaking day. Like it isn't until I get up, have my coffee, sit on my cushion, do my journaling, my meditation, all that stuff, that Zen Master Flash shows up here. Right? I create this every day. I said, you said you want those people to know their inner flame, to know who they are inside. So do you know who you are inside? He said, no. I said, I said, so you want to feel your relationships. You want to deepen your relationships. Are you present? And he said, no. I said, same with your kids, right? I said, yep. I said, so you can't, if your candle is out, you can't light somebody else's candle. Right. This is all Hallmark card stuff, right? But it's also true. And so I said, if you can't slow down, and especially since you're an introvert and need time for yourself, if you can't be in your body, and we joke, New York Jews live from the head up, right? We don't even know we have a body, until we go to our men's, weekend retreats where we beat on drums and, all that stuff. We don't know we have bodies. Mm. So you have to get into your body. So we did some breathing exercises. I said, you are now ready to find your own inner self, to be in relationship with somebody else's, to feel them. And we went through that. Right? So if you're busy, right, sometimes that's a coping mechanism because the feelings are too big, right? Remember that client that I was talking to you about that's going through grief, but it's coming up as anxiety. I want him to feel those emotions. I want them to come through, but they're too big for him. So I have him walking and walking and walking and walking. When my marriage broke up and I was suicidal, I woke up at 2:00 in the morning every night, maybe 1:00 in the morning, and I would walk for hours because I had all these emotions and I didn't want to push them down, but they were too big to hold. And then I would be sitting at my desk at work and I would just have to get up and I would have to walk out of my office and I would walk the perimeter of the parking lot 15 times because I wanted to feel, but they were too much. So I just kept them moving. You know what I'm saying? Right. So for me, however you can let them in just a little bit of time, because sometimes they're really overwhelming. Mm-hmm. I don't have to tell you.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's similar to like when I notice my dog, Hank, it's obviously, when it's time, when they got to go for a walk. And I have that with myself where it's like, you are hitting your head against the wall, like, get up, let's go, like, let's move. And, whenever you start to feel stuck, to kind of like have that, because the tendency is to do more to try to get out of it. But, movement paired with the not doing, with, sort of just making room, but knowing again that it's just going to be an honoring, like it's not going to be a result, within that walk. This isn't all going away or getting fixed or being resolved. It's that constant thing of reminding yourself, like, the belief that this can and will or should be fixed within an hour from now. It doesn't help at all, and any chance I get to sort of highlight that for people, I really do love to do that. Yeah, I kind of want to see with you, is there anything else when you think about people? I mean, if people are finding us through the book right now, they're at about week 20. So they're probably actually a similar timeline to your own loss, in terms of where they might be showing up to this for a deeper dive. And some people will just be finding it organically, obviously, as well. In that sort of phase of beginning to blend, the daily, the real life, the work, hopefully what lights you up, your purpose, with navigating grief. Words of wisdom to offer to those people.
Yeah, it comes up in weird places. So for me, I don't feel a lot of grief, again, because of the circumstances of this particular loss. But my son moved into a new apartment. And while my brother was struggling, he loves tigers. So I do artwork and stuff like that. So I made this mosaic puzzle of this gorgeous tiger, and I laminated, and then I framed it, and I made it beautiful, and I sent it to him. And I have a lion because that's kind of my spirit animal. So I said, my lion and your tiger, man, we're together. And I sent him that tiger, and he loved it, and he would send me pictures of it all the time, and how much strength it gave him. Then he died. was one of the few things from his apartment that meant something to me that wasn't heavy, that it felt like a connection and it felt great. But I didn't think about that. So I had it in my house and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. And then my son moved into this apartment and I said, would you like the tiger to remind you of Uncle Barry? Would you like, it's very special. Would you like it? And he says, I would love it. So he has it. So I go over to his apartment and all his pictures are up except that one's sitting on the floor. And
Mhm.
I was like, why is that on the floor? And he said, oh, mom said she doesn't want me to put it up. I'm like, why? And he says, it's some Jewish thing. It's, tigers and it's not good and all this stuff. And I said, I said a few things that I shouldn't have said. But I said, please, if you don't want it, I'll take it. And he said, no, no, I want to put it up. I said, great. I'm driving home and I'm furious. Like I am furious. And I want to just trash my ex-wife, who I love dearly. And then I went, what's going on?
Mhm.
What is this? Because this is inordinate, right? I'm seething with anger, murderous rage. And then I realized it, and that's when the grief comes up. It was one of the few. I said that tiger is so special to me. It's one of the 5 things I have of my entire family that connects me to the good part, the warm feeling. And for someone to trash it that way, and then I said, oh, I have to have a conversation with her. And then I called her and I told her the whole story. She goes, I am so sorry. Had no, one, I didn't know you made it. Number two, I did like all this stuff. And two, I didn't even say that. I said this and he must have misunderstood. So she fixed it and all that stuff. But the thing was, it showed up as rage
Mhm.
while I was having a great time and I didn't understand what it was. And it turned out that was grief.
Mhm.
So while I'm going about my day to day, having a good time, hanging out with my son, all that stuff, rage shows up. And if I didn't inquire, I would have trashed another person and not known what that was about.
Yeah, it's like 3 levels deep that you realize like it is the grief, it's presenting in a totally different way. And I mean, anybody who watches this on YouTube will see me like nodding and almost like smiling because it's just like those moments of like anger where you're just, if it's abnormal for you, especially like for me, it's like, whoa, 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 dude, whoa, like what is happening? Like you said, murderous rage. Like, I mean, I don't want to admit to being murderous rage on air, but it's like that all of a sudden, and it may be harder if any of that is sort of in line with what may have been normal before to catch, as well. That's not always easy. But I love this sort of this this kick in the butt you're giving to allow and weirdly with the theme of this episode is like making the room for things to show up fully but then staying curious and compassionate within them and then something that I fail to do sometimes is what you're saying is going a step forward and including the people around you in that in what showed up and in the awareness and sort of your thought process because there I at least would years ago would want to hide the anger or the rage or
Mm-hmm.
the outburst and just sort of share and be a part of me, realizing it was grief and moving forward and being this more evolved person in a way. But now I realize like how much more beautiful it is to communicate that entire process of humanity, really, like this is how it showed up. This is what it was trying to say that it was, and it wasn't, but this is like, how I got from A to B. And I think being willing to share that with the people around you is something that takes a lot of trust building. But when you can get there, the acknowledgement and the connection is just so much deeper, when you can really admit that.
But it also took years of work, practice, because when I thought I was a terrible person inside, I was the nicest person on the outside. Right.
Mhm.
I just covered it up with sugar and nice, and nobody saw emotion from me. Everybody liked Mark, like all that stuff. Now that I know who I am, now that I know, I've cleaned a lot of that wreckage, I don't feel that darkness inside. Now I'm allowed to have humanity. I still don't like it. I still would like to be perfect, but now I allow it. And without crumbling. Oh my God, you're human. Yes, I am. Which that used to be an insult.
Yeah, no, seriously, yeah, that resonates so much. So as we begin to wind down here, let me ask you this: if someone's listening, as you said, you're fully booked. The practice can't get in with Mark, so we're really going to take advantage of this time with you. If somebody came to you right now, and for the sake of your thought leadership and how you show up, somebody who was like me, a high achieving person with a lot going on, and who is committed to wanting to honor grief that's entered their life, unexpectedly, but also continue to show up as they do, professionally and even personally in family life at that same level. What is like a statement or a question that you would just, kind of have them pondering right now?
Oof. It depends on where they are in the curve, right? Like the instructions are written on who's in front of you, where, what, again, we'll talk about my client who's dealing with the grief now.
Mm.
I spent so many mornings just loving him and allowing and listening. And then there was a point where I said, it's time to put a fucking helmet on and go to work.
Mm.
Right. It's time, but I feel like this thing in my chest. Yeah. Put your hands on the keyboard, get your work done. You're a CEO, be a CEO with that energy. Right. But before that, I would have never said that because because he wasn't, that feeling piece, he wasn't comfortable with that. So for me, it's really honor exactly where you are.
Mm.
Honor exactly where you are. Grief just has no freaking rules and doesn't abide by them if there were some. So, at one point you may need to crawl up into bed, and at another point you may need to force yourself to go put a helmet on and go to work. And I don't know, I can't tell you when that is.
Mm. I at least listening to that definitely have and always had some sort of inner knowingness around exactly where I'm at when you say that. Like as you're saying that right now, for me in this moment, the grief I'm honoring today and where I'm at in my process, I need to put my helmet on. Like when you're saying that, like, so if you're listening to that and you have like one big, hit from your intuition one way or the other, it's probably, very, very, very correct. So I'm gonna, yeah, laughing and lovingly put my helmet on after this interview. Um, this has been so great. As I wind down, I always, committed to myself, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it my way. I like to ask the guests where do you find the funny? I mean, what you can share, like, where you go to laugh or what's been funny to you recently. It can even be something like what's funny. But I just I'd love to hear what gets you laughing in all of this.
Kathleen Madigan lately. I've been watching videos of Kathleen Madigan. YouTube is just so great. All this stuff from my childhood, way before you were born. There is so much classic stuff on YouTube that I find stand up. I love watching stand up. I love watching clips from old shows. But my real juicy guilty pleasure is talent shows. I
Uh,
am a, I am a complete and utter fool for The Voice and America's Got Talent and all that stuff. And I love when people just put it all out on stage and just like, here I am,
yeah,
what do you think? And then watch them grow or shrink or like I love that.
it's awesome. Yeah, no, that definitely that lights me up. All I'll say is in theme with this episode is the funny this week has been a lot in self-talk for me. It's like I just the things that are coming up and the things that I have to say back, and it's literally like there are just certain weeks in this process in this life where I am like babysitting a toddler, and it's going to a point where it can be very funny and like I can laugh through it, but it's just like just sort of clinging to those old safety mechanisms, just trying to like literally unwrite my own book. Like just no, we can fix it. We can fix it. Tell them you're sorry. Tell them we're not going to honor it anymore. We don't want to check in daily. We want this done. We want this over. Get rid of it. I don't want to do this anymore. And it's just like right before this call, I'm like, is there any way I can get out of this? Because I don't want to stand by the honoring of grief right now. I want to fix, and I just think it's so funny just to remind people that like that's always right there for me. Like it doesn't matter how many times I say it, there's this beautiful part of me that wants to protect me from ever feeling that again, that tries to trick me all the time. I'm learning a lot right now. I've been talking about this to a few people, and three different people referred me to read The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and so I've like started to like jump into that a little bit. But it's just you're reading it, and it's you think you're the only one in the world, and then you start to like connect in this way, listen to a podcast, read a book, hear you talk today, and you're laughing, and you're like, you thought you were special? Like this literally is like everybody who is dealing with this, So I mean, I find the funny in it obviously, but yeah, that's where we're at. So speaking of,
Karen Goldfinger Baker. I don't know if you've met her through Patty.
oh, not
Great.
yet actually, but she just put her on my radar. It's always threes for me. Something comes up three times and it's time. So we're at two.
She has the Trauma Hiders Club podcast.
Mm.
And she and I talked about our childhood, and I was like, I was molested, and this, and we're laughing, and it's just like, oh my god, and this carried into my sex life into an adulthood, and isn't that hilarious? And like I find the funny now. I find the funny in the ridiculousness of the shit that drives me from 50 years ago, 55 years ago. It is hilarious now.
It's the truest indicator that you're in company of people who really get it. Those are the friends who really get it when it's like, I can joke about this, and everyone buckle in because it's probably going to be one of those ones. Where can people find you? Where's the best place to find you?
So everything, my Rising Leader program, I have a group program coming up, and everything, my podcast is all at markjsilverman.com, mark the letter J, silverman.com.
Amazing. All right. And as we're checking out, what's one word for how you're feeling? I'm going to say mine first, so you get the last word. Connected.
Joyful.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here today, Mark. That's easy.
Thank you, Addison.
Well, Grief Club, that's the show. If you enjoyed it, please let us know by liking and leaving a review. This will help as many people who may need what we're talking about find it the fastest. Remember to honor the journey, and when that gets tough, find the funny.